Okay, we are live. Hello, I'm vertearbusto, and this is one of the updates of the final exam series. It's Tuesday, karaoke day at the club. The 10th, 11th, 10th, I think we're on. And this is, like I said, part of the update series. Right off the bat, I think I want to talk about personality versus self. This is something that's been going on in my mind, and it's something that we deal with in the program and in recovery, is understanding the role of self and your personality and all that. Okay, so there's a bus going by. All right, so this is I'm giving some. The final exam series is basically I'm getting ready to move out of this northeast college town, right? And I've loved it here. It's a sister city to where I grew up in this area, and I've lived here my whole life. And this particular city I've lived in for the last 14 years, and I always wanted to live in a college town. It's more or less where I came from, that community.
Hello.
Hold on. Yeah, so it's one of the locals with a skateboard. He asked if I was doing a YouTube video, and I said, yeah, an update. I don't know if he thought I was still recording or not. Hold on a second. I've said this before. The pause button is pretty much the only editing I'm doing these days. Aside from setting up a good shot and making sure that I'm able to be seen in the frame, pretty much. But the manually speaking, the pause is the only editing, cutting and pasting, or cutting from scene to scene, transition. The pause is the only transition that I got. And so it's a studio. This is what this town, these college towns, in a lot of cases are about. Is that the city is your influence, and you do things that involve the local architecture and the local sculpture and all of that. And so, you can see behind me, that's the theater, right? And I kind of, it's part of the reason I'm doing this here is that it's a historic town. It's part theater, it's part drama, part the thespian and creative, and there's an air to it that's been useful and helpful and wonderful to me. But I am now getting old, up there in years, and I really do feel more like a graduate student who's finished with college, finished with schooling, and I need to move on, preferably to somewhere where it's warmer, much warmer, which means south. In some way, maybe southwest or south, but definitely souther than up here. And so I've spent, right, so this is what the final exam series is about, is me giving a synopsis of what I've learned and gone through in the college town for the last 14 years, but more specifically, I've been doing the Schumann resonances and earth-based electricity for the last 5 years, right? So, not quite half of that, not quite a third of it, 5 out of 14, 7 is half. So this is, a more introspective look from me, more personal, and that's sort of what this is. The oral exam is what tell us. You have the written exam, and then, which I've done. I've given plenty of videos and written work in manuscript, we'll just call it, dedicated to the technical aspects and all the Schumann resonances and all of that. And I've given the like I said, the technical, the scientific, hold on, scholastic, the scholastic aspects of Schumann resonances and geoelectricity and all of that. Okay, so at this point, like, this is kind of my going away, sort of, because I'm leaving. When I get the things squared away, I'll just say, when I get things situated properly, then I'll be, oh good God, then I'll be more ready to go. But the cold is killing me here. I feel it deep in my bones, and I've just had it enough of it for my life. So as it gets closer to that, I'll talk more about that. That's why I'm not discussing that right now. It's not pertinent. It's not relevant, right? I got to close out the scholastic part of this, right? It's a college town, and so before I can, leave it and grieve it, as it were, I'm giving this final exam series here where I'm talking more personally, one-to-one, from human to human on, what I've learned, what I've gone through, but specifically how how it relates to, the Schumann, and how it relates to this whole area of Earth-based electromagnetics, and yet there's also this whole spiritual side to it. There's a whole spiritual side, allegedly, to the heartbeat of the planet, and there is all this other stuff that comes with this New Age philosophy or New Age agenda. I'm not sure what is the correct phraseology to put it, but it's there's a lot more to it, and with it is the solar radiance and all of that. Somehow morphogenically changing your DNA into a silicate base, blah, 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 blah. And so, with all of that, right, what I've learned about the Schumann over and above the electricity, which I come into this with, like I said, the knowledge and understanding of, how to read the graphs, right? That's my doorway entry into this. There's the addition of the Earth-based, all of the geo-electric power grid and all of that. Okay. So, with that, of that understanding, how am I, what am I doing with it? How am I taking, what's my takeaway from this? And it's not just explaining it technically, but it's like everyone wants to know, how is this affecting me personally? How is this, the Schumann like affecting me? How is it supposed to make me feel, right? And this is not something, I need a trim. My beard needs a trim. It's bugging me. Some people like it, right? It's cool. All right, I know, it's cool. But it's kind of scraggly for me, or too much. It's just, because anyway, where was I? So everyone wants to know personally, how does this affect me? And so there's the physiological effects of it, of not just the Schumann, but also of the KP, the telluric currents. Right? The Schumann resonances are technically Schumann resonances are technically a subset of telluric currents, but it's a whole different channel. That you have the waveguide and the electricity. It's two different things. It's fascinating to not confuse them, one for another. To get it right and straight and correct, what they do and what they are is of itself fascinating, that it should be known and learned for itself. The difference between the Schumann resonances and the other telluric currents that are induced from the solar blast, a plasma, released from the sun, from flares, that there is an induction from the voltage, the high voltage up there into the earth ground that's different from, separate from, and yet interrelated with the Schumann resonances. And you got to remember, we're talking about powers and orders of magnitude that are different between the telluric currents and the Schumann resonances. All right. So we're talking about thousands of times difference in power, okay? Now, I think this can relate to, or might loosely relate to, the subject that I had wanted to talk about going into this, is the difference between personality and self, okay? So you have two different power levels that we're talking about. One is in the background. Schumann resonances are in the background, okay? It's a divine principle, we'll say, how they work. They're not, first off, they're not rising, okay? They don't do that. There's a series of harmonics. These are the most amazing, fascinating freaking things that I can study, I think. Because they're electrical, but they're whisper strength. They're very weak, and that's one of the things that's important to understand about this, is the difference in magnitude, difference of order of magnitude and strength between Schumann resonances and the proper telluric currents. What you would call the total electron content that they pick up in the VLF monitoring station at Kumiania, right? So you have very subtle radiations, the harmonics, in the atmosphere, but then you have much stronger current, right? So I'm not sure if I can even make this proper analog or proper comparison or parallel, whatever, I'm not sure. But there is the principle of self, which is of divine origin, right? It's like a mold for potential personality to exist. Now, without self, you couldn't have a personality or individuality or ego or any of that, right? So, self it's like I said, it's a divine principle that comes from God, because you from the Creator, okay? Now, I know a lot of people don't really believe in a creator God, and I understand that, because everyone wants to claim that God is their God, and a lot of people are really militant about Jesus as God and Jesus as Lord, and and all this kind of stuff, and I give due respect to that, and yet personality, there is the personality aspect of the Godhead, the Trinity. That's one of the three aspects, and that triune doesn't have to be Jesus. I mean, there's Krishna, Vishnu, and all of these other personalities that are there in other cultures that are accepted as, I think, traditionally accepted as, maybe not by you, but by the adherents. Those personalities are of divine origin that come from their God, right? And I have said this myself, that you ascend through your personality first, right? That's a quote from the Theosophical Society that I had read, and I absolutely believe that your personality, whether or not you can distinguish between personality or self, is less important, right? Yourself is the divine blueprint, if you will, for you existing as an individual, you having a personality. The personality is somewhat on a scale between the personality and individuality, right? Self and ego, it's like if you look at the chart, right? The electric and the magnetic, you have on this, the upright scale, you have the divine origin of self and ego. They offset each other, right? Self is the impersonal, but the impersonal, but the individual. Right? I don't know even how to explain this, that it's not confusing. But you have the ability to have, it's neutral, it's completely neutral. It's, everyone gets the same. You get a blueprint of humanity, humans, based on your genetics, right? However, ego is individuality to a person, right? They're principles that are given to us to use. How we use them is personality and individuality, right? Personality is plays well with others. Individuality is, we'll just call leadership, right? Maybe. Or you're a criminal, right? You're not following the rules, the rest of us are. And that sort of personality is, I want to be at one with, right? If you know, I want to be with, I'd like to be part of what's going on. And so my personality is the part of self that wants to be with others. Individuality, on the other hand, is I'm not really fond of being with others, being around others, being near them, and I just kind of prefer to make my own way as often as I can. They're both aspects of human experience that you can have, and a lot of people are somewhere in, I think, the middle, or maybe they work on the they're trying to perfect maybe more, or they're trying to do more into the being with others, right? It's a very common thing, is that people want to be with others, and you want to be part of the group, and that kind of thing. And yeah, sometimes, not all groups are the same, and you have a group can take on its own identity. Okay, and I'll just leave it kind of like that if I can. Maybe I can go into a little detail. I don't know. But anyone that's been part of a group, and it acts in a certain way of its own accord that may not be in accord with any of the given group members. And if that, I don't know if that's too complicated or too general or whatever, but a group acts differently. A group acts like its own organism. I think that's the proper way to put it. There's a book on that, actually, The Wisdom of Crowds, or The Logic of Crowds, or something like that, where they go into a lot of stories of the difference of, crowds acting one way versus people acting another way, and it's a fascinating read. Because it's absolutely true. People will act in a crowd differently than they would act individually as a person, right? When given their own requirement to figure it out, people a lot of times one-on-one will figure it out in a different way than if it's one group dealing with one person, or one group dealing with another group, or all of these interdynamics, right? It's just part of personality, part of individuality, part of self, part of ego, all of that of humanity that needs to be dealt with. And again, you have, this is what the guides showed me, that you have the divine principle on the upright, holding things, throughout the ages, because you have self and ego. They're, or maybe ego and self, either or. I think maybe ego up here and self down there. Okay, either or. But there's somewhere between self being one of a group, as opposed to ego being me as my own group, if you will. personality goes a lot with will. Personality and individual go on the spectrum of, or the I guess the spectrum of will, personal will or personal desire. So these are things my guide showed me that are part of the working of the principles of working with people, working with others, is being part of, and yet if you have something unique to offer, you have to put it out there in a way that benefits others. Right? All of this whole area of dealing with humans and persons and 2112. Okay, looking at the time check. So all of this workings and dealing with people is part of the human experience. That's like developing the workability with other people is it really becomes first and foremost, you know, love of self and being able to take care of yourself, being able to, you know, navigate between other people's needs and your needs and their wants and your wants and all of this kind of stuff. Acting with morals and acting, oh, look at this fool. He's sitting on his skateboard. There you go. You can see him, you can hear him. Yeah, that was the kid that just asked me if I'm doing a YouTube video. Yeah, yes, I am indeed, and now you're in it. So anyway, that's part of what this whole series here is about summarizing it and summating it and summating it for myself, but also for you, so you get some benefit out of my whole thinking process. And I think if someone before me had not, how do I put this? If someone before me had not linked Schumann resonances to some spiritual evolution, then it would be out of place for me, I think. I believe maybe it might be out of place for me to insert some type of a spiritual or etheric connection, we'll just say. However, having been put there by some other means, it gives me the kind of free-flowing ability, if you will, that I can actually address that very thing, and not only maybe address it for what it is on a surface level, but also to give you the more correct and true, you know, the science and tech version, more correct and true understanding of Schumann resonances without the attachment to something that it's not, shouldn't be attached to, but also to give you the true science and tech, if I can, whatever, if it exists, behind what is alleged to be attached to the Schumann resonances, but is of its own different, more fascinating, fabulous thing of itself. Right? This whole ascension thing that It's not coming from Schumann resonances. It's not coming from Earth's rising frequencies. I mean, because number one, they're not. You're misreading the graphs, number one. But number two, I mean, even if it was, you still would need to make a conscious, that's what makes it so difficult here. You still need to make the conscious effort of your will and all of your decision-making power that you make that decision to arise, to awaken, and to ascend. It's not accidental. You're not a victim. You don't have essential symptoms like, oh, because I have these mystical symptoms, I must be ascending. And no, that when that can be explained, your alleged symptoms can be explained from RF. I don't want to say poisoning. It's not. It kind of is though, but RF interference. Radio frequency, RF radio frequency interference, And I've had the discussion with people on this very issue, very topic of whether or not that is, and, it's its own thing. And I think that's why it's important for me to talk about, relative to the Schumann and all of that, why it's important to bring up these topics of ascension from the real true, from what historically that they have been. And you're free to have your own belief. I'm going to say that, free to have your own belief. But I believe, the God I believe in, the creator of the universe, operates through principles that are the same throughout the ages. The Alpha and the Omega, that to me has always meant from everlasting, from the beginning to the end. That it'll always be the same. For humans, it needs to always be the same. You can't go changing it up through every, generation or whatever. Those principles that come from, above have to be, held intact. And there are warnings against messing with it. And it becomes a question from the people, by the people, of, does the great ultimate, the creator, exist? Because they've gotten in there and they've messed with it. But it of itself is the truth. And you know the truth because it's written on your heart, stamped on your heart, and stamped on your DNA, and such as it is, right? And you're free to believe what you want, but, save some miracle, your DNA is not going to be magically transmogrifying to some advanced state without you doing some advanced work to elevate it into happening, right? That's one of the great wonders and mysteries and frustrations and just crap of this place, is that you need to will it to happen, and you need to want it to happen, and you need to actively make it happen through the work of your hands and through daily meditation and putting all of your effort into all of your body and all of your mind and spirit and soul into making that happen, that growth that you so desperately want. And you put on the Schumann, all that hard work on the Schumann to do when it's yours to actually do. No, it's not doing for you what you're not doing for yourself. It's not going to magically transform you if the whole rest of you is not on that pathway and working that pathway, and you're just feeding your body with all kinds of crap and the food and the mental and the spiritual and all of this stuff that's not in accordance with the proper pathway. The screen just went dark, which means I am now at low battery, and we are going to have to end this, I think, at, 25 or 28 minutes, whatever. So, all right, so while I still have battery left, thank you all for being here, and I appreciate your letting me ramble on in this update, and it was very nice. I needed to do this, and it's 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night at this point. Karaoke is just starting. I'm probably not karaokeing. I'm probably going to go to the van and knock myself out. Anyway, all right, on that cheery note, have a good rest of your night, everyone. Namaste. Namaste.